Many high school students take on seasonal summer jobs to earn pocket money or save up for something important. John was only 17 when he first stepped through the gates of the old cemetery in his hometown. Although working at a graveyard seemed rather gloomy, it would have been awkward to refuse. After all, it was John's father who had arranged the job with the old caretaker. On the first day, the young man was struck by how vast the area was. The cemetery stretched for many acres, extending deep into the woods. Among the trees, tilted gravestones were visible, some overgrown with young saplings. John felt uneasy walking along the narrow paths past unmarked, overgrown graves. He was especially frightened of the old mausoleum right by the gates. It was a large stone structure with a heavy door leading downstairs to the crypt. In the darkness, dozens of caskets were stored there. John thought the place smelled of dampness and decay. He tried to keep away from the mausoleum and hurried past it. Working at the cemetery turned out to be harder than he expected. He had to spend hours mowing the overgrown areas, clearing away branches and litter. But over time, John got used to this place. Now the cemetery seemed to him not so much eerie as sad and neglected, and the young man was glad he could make this place a little tidier. With time, John did get accustomed to working at the cemetery. During the day it was peaceful, the silence broken only by birdsong and the rustling of leaves. But at dusk, the atmosphere changed. The shadows grew thicker, as if someone lurked behind each gravestone. One evening, as John was finishing up in the mausoleum, a draft slammed the heavy door shut, locking the youth inside. His heart plummeted. John found himself trapped alone with dozens of corpses. He screamed in the hope that someone would hear him. But the caretaker's cottage was far away, and there were no living people nearby. In despair, John pounded on the door. The cold crypt air chilled him to the bone. It seemed the shadows were growing denser, creeping in from all sides. Or was it just his imagination playing tricks? Suddenly, a strange sound came, like a muffled groan. John looked around in fright. Something stirred in the far corner. There in the darkness, someone was there. John froze in terror upon hearing the sound from the dark corner of the mausoleum. Something definitely moved in the gloom. The youth stood paralyzed, unable to budge. Adrenaline surged. His heart pounded like crazy. Carefully, with trembling hands, John took a lighter from his pocket and flicked it. The faint flame briefly lit up part of the mausoleum, and in that dim light, the youth made out the outlines of caskets lined up along the walls. Holding his breath, he directed the lighter into the dark corner. There was no one there. From the intense fear and adrenaline, his imagination started to conjure up things that were not really there. John desperately wanted to believe that. Opposite the mausoleum entrance, high up near the ceiling, was a small window, the only source of light. It could be a way out, but reaching the window would be tricky. Directly below it were massive stone shelves, double-decker tombs. The coffin niches were sealed with heavy stone slabs, engraved with names and dates. In desperation, John looked over all these somber structures, trying to find a way out. Here and there, between the slabs were gaps, and from them wafted dampness and decay. At the thought of dozens of bodies resting there in the dark, the youth felt sick. John decided to climb up the stone boxes and try to get out through the window. Stepping carefully on the slippery slabs, wet with moisture, he made his way up. At that moment, under his weight, the top slab let out a pitiful creak and began to rock. Before John could react, it collapsed under him with a crash. He fell waist-deep into the coffin. His leg cracked through the rotten lid, moldy splinters of wood painfully piercing his skin. Rusty nails sticking out of the rotting wood viciously slashed his leg. John could feel warm blood running down his leg. Mustering his last strength and gritting his teeth against the sharp pain, He climbed out through the narrow shattered window. His desperate cries were heard by Mr. Smith, who was in his caretaker's cottage near the cemetery. Seeing John's blood-smeared leg and his pale, terror-stricken face, the caretaker rushed to help him. Without wasting a minute, he drove the youth to the nearest hospital. Examining the slashed and bloody leg, the doctor looked at John with suspicion and asked what really happened. John said he had simply chopped firewood carelessly and got splinters in his leg. But the doctor stated that these wounds looked nothing like scrapes from wood. The doctor said, "These are bites.